Jump into reports, and hopefully all the slides I have are in the right order and can get all these reports out. So these reports will be about 5 minutes or less. I'll try to make mine as quick as possible. I'm also talking about UX quite a bit in a later session, so I will definitely, you'll have your fill of UX after this report. So I wanted to update you all on how UX did in 2024 at Orcasound. So we did go through quite a few changes this past year. Historically, I was involved with recruiting and onboarding new team members through the Democracy Lab platform in like 2023 and before. But at the end of 2023, I decided to focus more of my time and energy on UX research. I removed the job descriptions from our Democracy Lab project page. We still had new volunteers join throughout the year, but our increase in volunteers was at a much lower volume than previously. During the year, I had to step away to work some survival jobs from late spring to fall, and during that time, most UX teams did become inactive. However, a superstar UXer Daria did an amazing job collaborating with Paul and Skander on implementing UX research and design work for the listing web app, or what we internally call Orcasite. As far as I understand it, the Akarsha UX team remained active throughout the year. I don't know, Scott, you might have a little bit more insight into that, but. Oh, nice. Cool. Great. So Scott just confirmed what I thought was true. The Ship Noise team was active when I was leading it. We've made some great progress toward understanding the target end user to quiet commercial ships in the CHC. My goal is to see Ship Noise become a reality in 2025. Adrian ran some really impactful workshops with internal Orcasound stakeholders to better understand our users. I learned a ton from him, and he did a great job planning and moderating those workshops. So thanks, Adrian. Finally, Adrian and I participated in the Microsoft Hackathon in September. The 2-day event was focused on the Orca Hello AI platform, which we'll learn about a bit later today. More did happen for UX at Orcasound in 2024, as this is a high-level report. We had amazing contributors who contributed quite a bit of impact, and I'm excited to see where UX at Orcasound goes in 2025. All right, so now I'm going to ask Paul to come up and share about Dev in this past year. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Okay, makes sense. Cool, yeah, so Dev. So I'm going to be covering what we did on the Dev side by we, and on the Dev side, I mostly mean there's a lot of Dev efforts in Orcasound, but I'm mostly talking about the efforts that are largely led by Skander and me as the main Dev team, and with a bunch of other contributors who helped out this year. So most of our work this year has been centered on Orcasite. And I'll cover in a second exactly what Orcasite is. I think everyone in this room probably knows what it is, but for everyone else who may have not know what we mean internally by Orcasite, I'll talk about that. But I do want to say that it's been our most active year so far, just in terms of PRs, contributions, progress, everything, and yeah, some stuff here from you can see on our GitHub. Maybe interesting seeing our language breakdown that we use, and all the contributors we've had. And then this is what the live site currently looks like. This is what we mean by Orcasite. It's live.orcasound.net. It's the main site that connects everything together, where you can listen live and report when you hear interesting things. So in 2024, I'm going to go through everything we launched very quickly. So the biggest thing that came out at the beginning of the year was the reports page, which had been an internal page. You can see now it's available to everyone. And here you can see what users submit when they've heard interesting things. And you can access this by going to live.orcasound.net/reports. Then on the reports page, we also have a view for moderators who are logged in to be able to do different actions with the reports. The most important one is to be able to send out notifications when there's something actually going on. We have multiple reports. So that makes it a lot easier to send out notification emails. Moderators can just fill out a form and send out email to thousands of subscribers. And then the next thing in this kind of related to reports is detection provenance. So this is associating who submitted which detection, like which user submitted a detection. So we now have the ability to link a submitted detection with who submitted it and eventually be able to give everyone credit. Then on behind the scenes, less visible stuff, we did a switch of our data from one S3 bucket to another. Brief overview of what that means is we're actually hosting our data on Amazon Web Services, which provides a way to store your data in the cloud. And we switched to a different account that is now sponsored by AWS. So for the next 2 years, we are able to put data up there and not have to pay the cost ourselves because we actually have quite a lot of data now. We have over 7 terabytes. I think Valentina might cover exactly how much we have. Yeah, we save pretty much all the data on all the hydrophones like 24/7. Mostly lossy, but we're starting to do lossless as well. Related to that, we also had to update some of the hydrophones and how the code ran on them. So this is kind of outside of Orcasite. This is Orca node, but here we had to update some of the hydrophones and took the opportunity to clean up. They're deployed on all different versions of code, so now they're running on fewer versions. Hopefully, we'll have the opportunity to get them on just one version, but we kind of consolidated those. And yeah, we also now track everything that gets uploaded in our database. So all the files streaming files that get uploaded to S3, you can query and track them. And this will enable us to do a lot of cool things in the future because we can search and query for everything that's been uploaded and see what audio we actually have accessible. And then spectrogram generation, standards work a lot on this. So we actually already have the ability to generate spectrograms on the back end and basically on demand for specific sections of audio. API improvements. This is important for integrating with other things that we do at Orcasound. Specifically, Orca Node Monitor and Orca Hello are now using the data from Orcasite as like a single source of truth for what all the locations are that we're using and what all the details are for each hydrophone node. And finally, I just also want to mention bug fixes because those often don't get highlighted as a single feature, but we had a lot of different bug fixes, some of them UI bug fixes, other than backend and less visible. Yeah, Scanner.
So Daria is the UX side. We're the ones who submitted a lot of
Yeah, so Scanner mentioned that the UX team, especially working with Daria a lot this year, submitted a lot of the bug fixes that we did. So thank you to the UX folks for keeping an eye out and also making sure we have like a good functioning website. Yeah, and then this is kind of outside the general scope of Orcasite and the stuff we usually work on, but it's kind of under the dev umbrella in terms of switching to Zulip. So we spent a bit of time on that this year, and yeah, we have a lot of new features we can use in Zulip, and we can access our entire history. And the chat's now publicly accessible, so we can do open collaboration. And the other cool thing I mentioned is that it's we're also part of Zulip is an open source organization. They actually have summer code contributors as well. So it's kind of nice to support the open source community, and we can open issues if we have problems. So yeah, what's in development right now? So Scanner is actually working on this one, bouts. So bouts are a new feature where we can track long sessions of interesting activity, particularly Orca concerts. So this will let us have faster notifications, less work for moderators, and we'll have a log of past events so we can see everything that's happened. And then I'm working on user accounts that'll let you sign into Orcasound, and that will allow us to have a lot more community interaction and be able to get credit and feedback to users. collaboration. How did we actually work on all this stuff this year? We made a lot of changes to how we work on things. The biggest one is we have been doing regular check-ins for Orcasite, specifically for the Orcasite project. And we've moved from having project-based check-ins, we moved to having project-based check-ins instead of having them based upon UX versus dev and stuff like that. And that's been a big improvement. That's let us work closer between UI and UX. So we have, the theme has been devs using Figma, designers using GitHub. Thank you to contributions from Michelle, Dave, Andreas this year. It's awesome to have you folks jump on and submit code. And then finally, I'll leave you guys with some numbers that you may not have seen. Scanner and I pulled these from the database. So we don't have these in analytics or stats yet, but we have almost 5,000 detections. To clarify for folks who might not know, detections are every time the button is pressed and someone submits a report, that's a detection. Candidates are, if you have a lot of those at once, it creates a candidate so for a moderator to review. And then you can see that moderators, we have an option for moderators to receive every single email when a candidate gets created. So those are amounting to about 5 a day per moderator. We can also have, we have like 3,800 subscribers currently, a bit over 200 added in 2024. And we actually sent 19 events, were actually listening events. And that comes out to about 65,000 emails sent, which, the numbers go up really fast. So that's it for Dev. I don't know if there's any questions or we'll do this later. Yeah, move on. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Perfect.
All right, data science, perfect.
Hi all. A little bit update on the data science side, and we'll start with the data first. Like kind of looking at some numbers from AWS, now from 2 buckets, because we kind of are across different accounts. The beginning of the 2024, we started with 6.7 terabytes in our streaming bucket, and we should be at 8.6 terabytes currently. This is just streaming bucket, and we actually have a lot of kind of derived data sets, so they're kind of in other buckets. So that's to keep in mind that this is kind of just the raw data, and we have more than that. The data grows at the rate approximately right now 5.4 gigabytes per day, and that's most probably varies a little bit when some hydroform is on or off, but this seems to have stayed kind of through the year. And we have 7 hydrophones with 7 hydrophone folders, as folks showed earlier. So new sponsored bucket, thanks to Paul Praful for that, everybody who got involved into the setup. What does that mean for data science? For data science, that means that there are no data egress fees, which are the fees that like AWS charges if people want to access data from outside of AWS. So this means that, well, we're more open because we're not so locked with Amazon, and we can actually access the data and do big calculations from other locations. Which is particularly useful, I think, for us in the context of having a lot of volunteers. We don't want to kind of give them access to an Amazon account so they can work from their laptops. We can work with GitHub Actions, which we have been doing, so we can actually set up like long jobs and like process data, kind of like access all the data at once. And we can use other cloud providers if we have credits for that. So a little bit on data access, just kind of a reminder of our data format. The data comes in 10-second segments on our AWS account. They're in a .ts streaming format, which is not familiar to a lot of people, kind of like in the general world, that's not a familiar format. So something to keep in mind when we get new people, they get confused by that. And these small 10-second segments are organized in like around 6-hour folders, which are labeled with a timestamp. So it's not very easy to get a grasp on it. And for that, we have worked to have tools to get this kind of data into a wave format, which is more familiar and can be run in like a lot more like players and so on. So that work started way back by Orca HLS utils library by Dmitry Volodin, who is a GSOC contributor. And now we updated the package to, it was a little bit like stale for some time. Now it's updated to use the new data, the new buckets. So it's working. That said, in many applications for data science, we always get to these spectrograms. And sometimes the question is spectrograms, is that all we need? And the problem with that is that, well, we maybe all we need is spectrograms, but everybody needs spectrogram at different time resolution or different frequency resolution. So we always, if we decide, oh, should we just store some spectrograms so that it's useful for people? Everybody stores them at different resolution. Those people have different applications. So over the last several years, we have been thinking how, if we store some spectrograms, in what format to store them. And we have had some work by UW master students to kind of go through this process and decide what we actually store. This has been a process of 2 years of capstones. And first year, people built some, did some investigation of storing these spectrograms in Parquet format. And this year's team, we actually finally got things working. And we decided that after long discussions with Scott, Val, Ben, we decided that we actually can store them into a very high resolution of 1 hertz in 1 second. And the idea is that after that, people can recombine them into whatever lower resolution they want. Again, thanks to the AWS bucket, because this means that we are not hit by the large size. And also, kudos to the team this year, because they actually fixed some bugs of the team last year. So back to the think about fixing bugs. Sometimes you can spend 3 months on that. Your capstone could be fixing bugs. But now things are working, and the ambient sound analysis package can actually pull spectrograms in a Parquet format, which is kind of efficient for large data. And we can pretty much set the date for which we want to get the spectrogram. And after that, so the capstones were finished in March. After that, we set up some near real-time streaming, which was kind of an experiment. For every hour, we pull 6 hours of data, and we create a spectrogram, and we display them in a README of a GitHub repo. And we did it for free with GitHub Actions. And a proof of that is that once I set it up, it looked like my GitHub account looked like I'm doing a lot of work, but actually GitHub Actions was doing all that work. So every day it was doing that. And we ran it for like several months. And then I stopped it because I also set up, I used that use case for a general SciPy GitHub Actions tutorial. So it became famous to the open source world. And I have a little bit for 2025. I'll just say it quickly, we'll discuss more. But store all these, the goal is to store all these spectrograms and do historical analysis, set up continuous storing going forward, and improve the packages. And I think then we're in a good shape to actually do science, which we sometimes just do data science, but no.
Awesome. Thanks, Valentina. All right. Who is doing this?
I didn't create it yet, so.
Perfect. All right, Scott.
All right, so I'm representing Comox, British Columbia, where Jono and Ben are based. These are some of our Canadian colleagues up in sort of independent freelancers who I met through mostly Ben. He's a developer and a Python sort of based scientist, PhD level guy who's been working mostly with the BC hydrophone network, sort of a in part inspiration for Orcasound 20 years ago. And so BC Wales is learning about open source software. This was kind of their first foray into building code with Orcasound. But I think mostly what we taught them about was GitHub. But it manifested in a jointly funded project where BC Wales and Orcasound, mostly Beam Reach, were supporting Ben and Jonah. So Ben found Jonah. He's a freelance designer / developer based in Comox, and so they were able to meet together in person and starting in, I think, early around COVID time. And then this last year, in sort of 2023, 24, focused on trying to build something that would be useful for both the BC hydrophone network and ultimately for Orcasound. So that manifested initially in this sort of combined repository, which I helped them create. But once Jonah had a sense of how Orcasound runs its repositories, he created 2 other public repositories in 2024. So I've linked to those on the right. Then kind of rebranded the sort of open bioacoustic dashboard as CStats. So that's what we're going to call it from now on. And CStats has been deployed only in one place, which is BC Wales launched a new website, which is linked over here. Actually, kind of named after us. We're orcasound.net. They went with whalesound.ca. And so it's a little hard to find it, but I just figured I'd do a quick demo in honor of those guys. So this is their website, kind of like our WordPress site. I think it's actually based in Squarespace. So this is their Squarespace site, and there's an interactive map. I think the actual landing page looks like this. And if you want to get to the CStats visualizations, you have to choose a hydrophone. Most of these won't work, but the Simres site down here, close to us, has sort of defaulted to public access as opposed to password protection. So if you click on either of these 2 on their map, you can see the CSAT's dashboard without having to enter a password. So they're kind of working out their data sharing models across their whole network, but this is sort of the most open end of it. And so this allows you to actually explore data as of 17 hours ago. So it's not quite real time, but it's getting closer. Sometimes it's 5 days. I've noticed, but I think Ben has some scripts running that intermittently update this visualization. But to just run through it, just 10 seconds on each one. There's a station summary, lots of UI ideas here that we could improve upon or leverage. Daily detections across months, acoustic events visualized as diurnal patterns, so time of year versus time of day. There's a lunar cycle. No, that's just a zooming. And then, yeah, there is a lunar cycle here. I think you can talk about on and off. Yeah, it's this one down here. That's sort of how much moonlight there is on the sea surface. So that's a fun data exploration tool. They also have spectrograms, long-term spectral averages, making choices about axes and resolutions. This is a really nice type of display called a spectral density, which we haven't explored, but might be interesting. Sound levels, which will segue into the Parquet files potentially. You just need to translate from Parquet to, I forget exactly what format they're using, if it's CSV or JSON, but you'll notice here that these are daily averages. So we designed this UI to be zoomable. So if you provide it with hourly averages, you can zoom in. And but what they normally calculate is no finer than daily. Useless for understanding ship noise, but valuable for understanding seasonal changes. And then they also have a station uptime, which I thought Dave would appreciate. Dave Thaler. This is sort of a visualization of, and I actually have no idea what it's measuring. Yeah. Okay, so that's CStats in a nutshell, and in a deployed shell, I guess. But it's all open source code that we can leverage. Yeah, that's a summary of that.
The station uptime screen was actually my inspiration for the latest stuff that I was adding, because I look at it and I'm quite sure what it's measuring.
and it's like now it's something else. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to have something.
Well, the good news is that they were agnostic to like the data unit, and it's as long as it's formatted in this tabular way, you can use their visualization to display it. Should I just keep going with the next one? Okay. All right, so this is an attempt to just provide a little context for later in the day, probably trying to visualize where we've been recently versus where we could go. So I wanted to flag a few historic references that maybe we can look at over lunch. I pinned to the wall over here, and we'll eventually provide it. I've got them digitized someplace. I can provide a digital version for the folks online, but I wanted to just point to, like, there was an initial vision that Val and I had for Orcasound like 20 years ago. And then there was this shift from trying to build it all ourselves in 2017 to running a Kickstarter and starting to build in the open source model. So that's like the longer term recent context. And so I want to maybe invite people to ask questions about those and sort of see how far we've gotten based on where I thought we were going to go like 20 years ago. Right, so there's historical context versus like where we've been recently. Yeah, I wanted to say just thanks. What I'm going to show today is sort of a really high level, and there's a bunch of draft designs and work and development in progress around Orca Home, transition from our WordPress site to something like a headless CMS, and Orca Learn, and some of the stuff that Valentina's been working on that I'm not going to touch on at all. So I'm just going to keep this pretty high level, sort of schematic, if you will. So I updated this. This is what's presented on our support page for incoming developers. This sort of onboarding. This is a snapshot of everything. I usually say everything that's above this dashed gray line has been built. Oops. But I actually changed a bunch of stuff from red or orange, which means it's either not built or in progress, to green last night, because we made a lot of progress in the last couple of years. So things that I turned green were, this box down at the bottom, Akarsha, is now built and operational with sort of phase 1 partners, one of which is Orcasound, providing real-time data. It's still a little manual, but it's really close to being integrated, where we're providing data into a common data store along with the siting networks. At least some of the siting networks near some of our hydrophones. We're also, I think, as Brendan pointed out, really close to building something to characterize vessel noise and start to help mitigate it. So that also has been built. I turned this green from red. We have the beginnings of noise metrics. So a lot of the pieces of vessel noise is coming together. I've turned this green because for a while I didn't feel like the Orca Hello AI was really that useful, but I think it's now proven and useful and operational. It's just getting better and better. Yeah, and then I think the alerts we have, thanks to Scander, like we reduced the cost of the emails, and there's a lot more to be done on notifications, but I turned that green, but not this yet. Like getting conservation calls to action, like the ones that Dave was starting to imagine, is still not implemented. It's just visualized. And I switched this from a detection button to an actual UI that's starting to really allow users to classify sounds. So accolades, I think that's sort of recent progress that was made in the last couple of years. One thing that I think we're waltzing around, but we haven't discussed very thoroughly, is this is Paul's vision of sort of what a new architecture, as of now it's 4 years ago that you proposed this, but I think we're starting to move in this direction of instead of building one app and having it be not connected to very many things. Like I think we're starting to build around this kind of architecture where there are many presentation layers, like engaging Peter and trying to build a new presentation layer, I think, that leverages logic layers and data stores and APIs that have been built to facilitate communication between apps. So I think we could come back to this maybe during the discussion and see where we're going in the future can align with this sort of architecture. We just wanted to flag that as something I think was a good idea, and we're actually starting to implement it, but I'm not sure how much we're thinking about it. The other thing, just a little more detail on our Karsha. Orcasound is providing this API exchange is not quite automated. We're still sort of manually providing data, but as soon as we define bouts and we have moderators, we can fall into this idea of like, what's the provenance of the data point? How much do we trust it? And sort of documenting raw data detections from Orcasound versus moderated ones is something that we're basically ready to do. When we have user accounts, that's going to be even more granular. Like we can actually say who provided the raw detection, and you can be your own judge of how much you trust that detection. So I'm excited to implement that, but that's where we are in this puzzle. And this is the other thing that I think we could talk about is like, what do we want to pull out of this community resource? What spatial data from other marine mammal observations, whether they come from this Whale Alert mobile app or Orca Network putting points onto the map, or iNaturalist, for example. Like we can pull those back into our map interface. So I just wanted to flag that as sort of how we relate, in my mind, to Akarsha. So that's kind of the stage setting schematics I wanted to like present, but I hope we can go back and kind of revisit them as the day progresses.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
All right, who is presenting this? Okay. All right. Perfect.
I wasn't sure. So is Brett? I know Brett's on this. He was on the live stream, but he didn't want to present, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to definitely nod deeply, bow maybe to Brett, because he's been an amazing source of inspiration and like fast progress. I think both for the Canadian community, the Halo group, where he sat in on many of those meetings, but he also often attends our stand-ups. So that's one thing I guess I'm feeling really successful about at the end of this year is, and thankful for the Amazon sponsorship, is like the idea of sharing your data as soon as possible and in a well-documented form is turning out to be really fruitful. It continues to surprise me, and Brett is a good example of that, where he was able to download our whole database before we had switched to sponsorship. And I only really knew about it because the egress costs went way up. And yet he's created a bunch of resources in Hugging Face and introduced us, really catalyzed a lot of good progress around how do we label data and how do we share the labels. So that's been a fast acceleration. I wanted to flag on the ML side, the more consistent, slower cadence of Microsoft's annual hackathons. Like that's continued to improve our existing binary classifier that Dave and Orca Conservancy helped us build with lots and lots of help from Microsoft's employees. I want to jump across to this idea of the United Arab Emirates. I'm not sure if
auto encoder, I forget what the view is. Is it something auto encoder?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you noticed in Zulip, but in the AI for Orca's Orca Hello channel, just a couple of days ago, there was a post saying, hey, my team's got a demo ready for you. And it took me a couple of days to sort of digest what the heck this was. But this is a team in the United Arab Emirates that I think post sponsorship, so recently, in the last few months, downloaded everything and did something similar to what Jose did during one of our Google Summer of Codes. He created an autoencoder that basically ingested all of the data and started to look for patterns. Yeah.
I'm a little confused. Is it MUA? Because there's something called an uncertainty autoencoder, which I think might be the acronym. It could be because like the two above it says MUA.
Yeah, so
Never mind. It's probably the UAE for.
that's me trying to create an acronym for a country. So,
No, I think you're right, actually.
okay. Yeah, so actually, Abu Dhabi, it maybe is where he's from. But my point is that somebody on the other side of the planet downloaded all of our data and created a very, very interesting visualization of it that looks for anomalies in this multidimensional feature space, for lack of a better word. So I just wanted to flag, like, there's a lot of progress that I can talk about on the left side, but there's also a bunch of progress that's either like proposed and almost about to happen, or just happens without any visibility because we were open from the beginning. So I think I guess I won't be surprised if in 2025 that it's, and it's not going to cost us the egress of all those terabytes disappearing into somebody else's data store. So that said, I just want to flag there were student projects in the last, some in 2024, some in 2023 that I think relate to machine learning. And also the more we label our data and clarify what we're going to call signals within our label, our labeled data, that the more we facilitate this sort of open machine learning or data science. So I think it's going to manifest in more visualizations and more models, algorithms, the more we provide the labeled open data. So there's some implied to do there, like we're pretty disorganized still in our labeled data, and we could be putting the labeled data into the sponsored data bucket as well, but we haven't yet. But I think that's likely to cause catalyze a lot more of this unexpected progress from contributors around the world.
Scott, Brett has his hand up.
Is that somebody talking?
Brett has his hand up.
I think I hear Val.
Yeah, Brett's hand is up. I'm just watching the screen here.
Oh, great.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to jump in. So I sent a video to Brendan this morning, but I also saw he was up at 4 a.m. So I wasn't super hopeful for him to get it before the slides. But some of the goals that we have for the next year as well is to move directly from the moderated calls and bouts to supervision and automatic retraining, so as soon as those are available. So right now we've been training models on like a yearly basis with the hackathons, and ideally that's triggered by like a GitHub action or something like that, where we can get the new data and then retrain it immediately, and hopefully that'll help like as we get new nodes up with different types of background noise, improve the robustness. So yeah, Bruno and Patrick have been working a lot on that. So I'm not going to take credit for that, but that would make about 4 times the amount of data available that the current model that's deployed would have. So we should get some boost in performance from that.
Great. Do you want us to try to play your video?
I put it in there somewhere. We'll
Okay.
find it.
Okay, great.
Oh, perfect.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. The last thing I was just going to flag is like there's ongoing work in Canada through this Halo group, which is very much aligned. So in 2024, we standardized what labels we're using when we go forward annotating on either side of the border. Orcasound students have proposed labels for things we haven't put much effort into, like humpback vocalizations, although there are 3,000 labels for humpbacks, which nobody's used yet. And we also have sort of dictionaries for the whistles of Southern residents and the clicks of Southern residents. At some point, I hope we'll hear more and interact in terms of open source code and models with Fabio at Dalhousie. But just know that he's thinking a lot about your question, Valentina. It's like, is spectrograms the best thing to use? Alternative representations and approaches are coming. Their Canadian goals are mostly a little bit more than what we've been doing. So instead of just asking, is it a killer whale, Southern resident killer whale or not, they're working hard on, can we differentiate between Southern residents, bigs, and humpbacks? There's more coming from the Canadian side of it, and I think it'll be open. Maybe I'll stop there.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, who's got Orca Hello? Perfect. All right. Back to the beginning, everyone.
Okay. Orca Hello starts with whales making a sound, and then it's picked up by one of the Orcasound hydrophones. and it goes off to the S3 buckets and goes from there to Azure. And there's a machine learning model that has been trained to detect killer whale calls, and it kind of has a continuous level of confidence in whether it's detected one or not. And if the confidence level is high enough, it sends a notice out to a moderator who knows the calls better than the machine does. And if we confirm that there's a call present, we notify end users. And the end users are responsible for helping the whales. So it might be like WDFW enforcement, know the right place to send their boat to protect the whales from recreational boaters. Or, it can be protected species observers who are trying to protect the whales from construction noise. Or, it could be the military where we're trying to protect the whales from sonar exercises. Or the recent addition has been the shipping industry where, we can detect whales at night and let them know where ship slowdowns are needed. So that's kind of the basic philosophy behind Orca Hello. What it looks like is the idea with tags is to have a standardized set of terms that characterize the 1 minute segment, and that would be helpful for searching. And then there's a dashboard, which is not that. Looks like we lost a slide maybe, or anyway, you can kind of filter the collection of segments where you can sort by time or location or moderator. So if you only want to look at Scott's good stuff, not my bad stuff, you can sort by moderator and put my stuff way down at the bottom that you'll never get to. And then you can also set a time frame, so it can be, I think, as short as the last 30 minutes and as long as the whole history of Orca Hello. And locations, you can either pick a single location or all locations. And you can also sort by confidence, so if you only want the ones that are most likely to have whale sounds in them, you can go to that, or at least according to the machine. And you can also look at when it was moderated. There's also a little menu that can connect you to links, and it'll do a couple things right off the top where it'll let you view spectrogram details. And what that means is it'll show you which part of the 1 minute segment the machine thought the calls were present. You can view map, which just shows you where the hydrophone sites are, or you can have it show links. And there are 3 kinds of links. Link to this record just lets you download everything you saw on the screen. So that's, the spectrogram and, confidence levels and time and date and location and all that information. You can download the audio file, which will let you listen to it or make your own spectrograms. So if you don't like the standard spectrogram, you can stretch it or shrink it or whatever you want to make it look the way you want. Or you can download the spectrogram as is. So if you don't have software to make spectrograms, you can just download the picture and it's good to go. So this is what a site map looks like. So this would be the Sunset Bay hydrophone. And as we heard earlier, there are 7 hydrophones. The first 3 are kind of the original Orca Hello set. So Orcasound had those up and running when we started working on Orca Hello. Sunset Bay is a new one, and that's one that Orca Conservancy is doing a lot of work on. So we're pleased to say that seems to be the most used hydrophone by the whales the last couple of years. North San Juan Channel is our newest hydrophone. in the system. Point Robinson and Mast were both down all of last year, and expect Point Robinson to come back up shortly. We're just waiting for a window to reinstall it where we need good weather and good tides and diver availability. And I don't know what the prospects for getting Mast online soon are. And then a key part of Orca Hello is notifications. So when the machine detects a candidate, it'll send out a request for moderation. And then whoever gets to it first can go through and say, yes, there's a whale sound, or no, there's not. And then a second email goes out that says it's a confirmed detection. And that's one where they can have a subscriber list where people who need to know right away can get that. And it'll say, what time the detection was, where it was detected, who the moderator was, and any comments about it. Also had some interns working on transcripts. So what they've been doing is going through the confirmed detections and trying to identify call types. Like you may get some call 10s or 37 or 16 or 36 or some 6s. Some they don't want to make a call on what it is. So if it's a really faint call, they just put an F to mark it as faint. They might put a W for whistles or C for clicks. And they put the start time to the nearest second for when the calls start, which you'd be able to use if you want to go back and do labeling. So you kind of search through the spreadsheet and say, I'm interested in call 10s, and find 3 seconds into the recording on 9/9/21 at 17:56:51 plus 3 seconds. There are a couple call 10s. So that would facilitate that. You can also get an idea of how much is going on. So you can see like this one, 1743 has a lot of calls that are identifiable to call type. So that's probably a pretty good recording to work with. Up towards the top, you can see some that just have occasional faint calls, and those would be less productive ones to work with. And I guess here's our dashboard one that I couldn't find earlier. So it'll have some statistics about what's been going on. So you look at the chart on the graph on the right and see that we've got a lot of confirmed ones, a lot of false positives, just a small number of don't knows. And I guess the numbers on the left are updated since that one was printed out. You can see so far we've got 687 segments with confirmed detections. That's over 11 hours of recordings we have that have machine detections that were successful. We've got over 4,400 false positives. We've only got 34 that we didn't decide to make a call about. And then we've got another 2,000 that we haven't gotten to. Kind of, I think, 2 general classes of haven't gotten to it yet. We've had periods where we had a lot of false positives coming out of electrical noise, and rather than going through every single one of those, we just kind of look at it and go, oh, that's that electrical noise thing again. I'm going to go on to the next one. And then there are other times where whales were vocalizing continuously. And in the early years, we might get 40 or 50 minutes of detections in an hour and kind of go, well, I don't have, couple hours to go through all this stuff. So I'll just kind of get the beginning and end and some in the middle, and we'll get back to the rest of it later. So anyway, I guess we do have a lot of catching up to do. And that's the next one.
Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm a freelance product designer, developer. Have been working on Orcasound stuff for a while. In particular, I've been keeping an eye on the user analytics coming out of Google Analytics off of the website for a few years now, and have noticed a lot of patterns with that. Started off with this one. We have people tuning in to the Orcasound streams from all over the world. This is for the entire year, 2024. In particular, that red bubble there is on Seattle, and the city of Seattle is far and away our biggest source of listeners. You can see the chart down there, 9,246 make it into the red, and then everywhere else is in the blue. That doesn't mean that we don't have very dedicated listeners all over. If you actually change the bubble size to the average time listened, you'll see a lot of rural locations where people are on the streams for hour and a half, 2 hours. This is kind of how the number of, this is actually tracking page visits on each of the hydrophone streams, which gives you a really, whoop.
I was just gonna tilt it up.
So with this chart, it gives you a pretty effective view, actually, of where. Well, it is one way of measuring where whale activity has occurred over the year. This is measuring number of people in the community who showed up to listen to on the page, which is a pretty good proxy, I think, for where the activity is. What this is driven by is a lot of the Facebook sightings activity, which isn't really a data source you can necessarily, tabulate and bring into a model, really, but it shows up here. And this is a lot because people, in particular Scott, post on those sightings groups. Well, what really happens is that people out in the community see whales, whether on San Juan Island at the park or they're at Sunset Bay or wherever they are. They post it on the whale sightings community. Scott sees it, and then he posts the link to the hydrophone page. It may be that people come through that link, or they come through just knowing about Orcasound to begin with. But either way, you can really see Sunset Bay lighting up there in the later part of the year, in the last 3 months of the year. Orcasound Lab was quite a bit more active, kind of in the April to June area. There were a lot of events. And that's kind of consistent in some other data I'm seeing, that Sunset Bay lights up in the late fall, winter time, and then springtime seems to be an Orcasound Lab thing. I could be wrong about that. There are some Orcasound Lab events later. But also the other thing that you see is, like, Sunset Bay came online before this. It was in fall 2023. And before that, Orcasound Lab used to be the big dog in the group and was always picking up all the detections. It seemed like all the orcas were in the San Juans. But now we're finding Sunset Bay close to Everett, close to Seattle, and in between Mukilteo and Edmonds. For some reason, huge orca hotspot, particularly in the fall and winter. This one is showing where those people came from. So we have these different sources. Like I mentioned, there's the Facebook groups that stimulates people to go find the site. So they might click the link from Facebook, or they might go and just do a Google search or just type in the link directly, but typically prompted by one of these citing communities. Or the blue ones, the email, the kind of the cyan ones, are when we actually send out an email blast. And there are certain detection events that are email worthy, namely ones that are going to be 30 minutes long, which is worth sending an email over, versus one that's just kind of worth discussing on Facebook. This is going to show the devices that people are using. So mainly the takeaway here is that the majority of people are on the mobile device. A lot, especially those Facebook users. This one's talking about, so the Orca Hello AI that Dave just spoke to. I joined the Microsoft Hackathon and have been, since I've joined Orcasound, I've been really curious about all these different threads of things, all these different groups doing different things. Trying to get them all straight in my mind. This effort at Microsoft is an AI machine learning project, different from the Allo group in Canada. But this has been set up with the idea that the AI can be trained to listen to the streams and pick up detections, just like humans can listen to the streams and pick up detections, maybe taking away some of the tedious effort involved in doing that. What I kind of found looking at this data was, so first of all, this is just kind of a look at all the detections that the AI has produced in over that time period, 4 years. And you can see the negative ones that the moderators, Scott, Dave, and Val, marked as negative, which means false positives. Yellow is the true positives, and then the red is the unknown, as Dave mentioned, very, very small percentage, and then the unreviewed, either haven't got to or kind of assumed to be false positive because they are part of a group of a time period where a lot of false positives are being generated and they just didn't feel like going through them all. So you can see a lot of that. What you can kind of see is that the number of detections has tapered off over time. And there's this kind of burst of false positives here, which I was able to determine is produced by the Point Robinson hydrophone, which I haven't really heard discussed much, but apparently there was a ill-fated deployment at Point Robinson that produced a ton of false positives in the Orcasound AI, or Orca Hello AI, and that's that rise you see there. And then comparing against the human detection record that comes out of the streams, you see this is kind of interesting. You see, like, the blue is the machine, and this is all raw detections, including false or true, and it's pretty constant across it. Whereas the humans really peak at these events that are, community driven. Overall, they come out about the same rate. Actually, the humans have a few more raw detections, and then when you look at the ones that are confirmed as positive, humans way outperform the AI, and there's very few true positives coming in. They're trickling in, but when you break it down by node, Orcasound Lab, interestingly, has gotten some positive AI detections recently that aren't really occurring at the others. So, and this is just a cool graphic that working with the UX design team at Microsoft, one of the designers there proposed this, and I mocked this up in Google Sheets. And what I like about this is that it shows, because you say, okay, there was an event in February 28th of 23. What does that mean in context, right? So here's February, and then it was at noon, say, so it's kind of in this area, right? So that was somewhat more of an outlier compared to where the majority of detections are. right? This is seasonal and hourly during the day. And then I've played with that a little bit more. This is trying to show kind of the age of the detection, and then this is kind of showing where it's happening, and this is kind of dominated by Orcasound Lab in this data set, but an interesting way of visualizing it. So I think that's 5 minutes for that. Then I was going to move on to this moderator interface, which kind of bleeds into the work we were doing at Microsoft because of that Orca Hello AI that Dave showed was a moderator interface. And so we've really been looking at how can we create something similar for the for our, what would you call it, for the Orcasound. I call it the Orcasound versus the Orca Hello detections that come in from the community. And so we did, a variety of things. We've pulled some different UX research, done some workshops, and then kind of looked really in depth at this moderator persona, as well as a kind of a user journey. I don't think I really want to get too into it. There might be opportunities later, but basically we've identified that working a lot with Scott as our primary user research model here of a moderator, that when we want to be able to identify bouts as the candidates come in. Scott wants to be able to set the start and end time of that bout, and then decide whether to send a notification about it, which would include a link to the stream. It would also have it also creates a record of the bout. So there's a page for the recording that has all the notes about the recording with the start and end time that Scott's created. And then Dave mentioned tags and keywords somewhat dismissively, I felt. I think this is incredibly important, personally, in order to be able to make sense of the database, at least from I approach this stuff from kind of a community scientist perspective, in which I want to understand what all this data means and how to interact with this data. How can I access it? Not being, a professional researcher that needs to go through all these channels to get, to the data. I just want to be able to pull up my phone and go in there and interact with whales at the same kind of fidelity that a scientist is able to. And I think tags and keywords is important to that. So I will show some more thoughts about that later. These are some design mock-ups that we did. This is the Microsoft Teams thing using their design language, and then this is mine, where I've imagined it in kind of a more React web app kind of based paradigm. And I think this mobile view is important too. Particularly, we saw that listeners like the mobile. There's really no reason moderators don't also need a mobile view, especially since they're on call 24/7 and need to be responding to these at any time of day and sending those notifications. So this is the actual MVP that Scander's built, and you can see he made a lot of. He did do some simplifications of the drawings, which I think are quite good choices, actually. He's got this ability to zoom in and zoom out here on the spectrogram and set the bout start and end time. And
to be fair, it'll be closer to your design.
Yeah.
Reconfigure. That's most interesting about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's an MVP, and compared to, I think there's definitely some similarities here. I've kind of basically imported the entire DAW feature set here, and he's expertly kind of pulled out the salient bits. And yeah, so that's it.
So it'll be interesting to see how much those graphs change since the AI was all redone at the hackathon and the graphs of AI versus humans only went up to for the hackathon, right? So hopefully in 2025, we'll see much better graphs there. All right, so I'm Dave Thaler. I'm going to talk about the Orcanode monitor, which is brand new in 2024. So the audience here is not the actual whale signals. This is the hardware actually up and operational and streaming signal to the internet so that our data is actually valid data, okay? And so the audience here is people that maintain the hardware, the hydrophones themselves, right? Things happen, right? There's things like bomb cyclones and power outages and breakages and so on over time. And so when something breaks, somebody has to go and maintain those things, okay? So the Orcanode monitor is the hardware monitor that says, is the hardware actually working and streaming actual valid audio? Okay. And so it does a couple things. So there's a notification system. So out of the hydrophones that are streaming data, it monitors those in near real time, and it checks about every 10 minutes the state of all the hydrophones in a bunch of different systems. And it will send real-time notifications to maintainers if those are offline. And so if somebody is trying to maintain a particular hydrophone or has access as being on call to service a group of hydrophones, say on a particular island or in a particular area within driving distance, okay, then you can subscribe to notifications via email or Zulip or SMS or whatever else it is you want. Okay. And so right now we figure about every 10 minutes of polling is about the right. We could go up or down from there if there's a reason to. Okay. And then how do we figure out what's going on? Well, it actually takes every 10 minutes, it samples the latest TS file, which is the 10-second clip that we heard about. It'll watch that 10-second clip and it'll run a spectral density and it'll say, does this look like it's real, some real audio of, water sounds and stuff, or does it look like it's all audio hum, or is it silence and so on? All right, so in this example, right, you see Bush Point, and you can see a big spike there. That's at 60 hertz, which is the electricity frequency. And so audio hums of microphones that are artificial, they're not real sounds, right, show up at 60 hertz and multiples of 60 hertz. And so if all we see is lots of stuff at 60 hertz and multiples, then that's just a hum and not real signal. And that's been the status of like Point Robinson for some time. Then you have things that are completely silent, right, where there's no microphone plugged in, for example. And those horizontal lines is really about the threshold below which you consider it just silence. There's no actual signal there. So what we want to see is we want to see lots of spikes in the density of frequencies that are not at 60 hertz or multiple that are above those lines. And that looks healthy. Okay. And so that means there's these categories of, silent or unintelligible, meaning hums, or actual, signal. And then there's a dashboard that we use in weekly meetings. So that it's not just the notifications. So we reviewed this, and so you can see all the different hydrophones that show up on different systems. And so it's monitoring the state of the management interface, which is Dataplicity, where maintainers can actually go and remotely log into the Raspberry Pi and check the status and fix things and so on. How much storage is it consuming? The Mesmo column is it streaming logging of what's going on, right? So not the audio signals themselves, but the logging of events that Raspberry Pi is seeing. The S3 stream, that's the actual audio stream, and that's where it will show up as being online or offline, unintelligible. As I mentioned, it's just the audio hum. You'd see silence in there. Actually, the top one, Enders Bay, that one is actually just silence right now if we drill into that one. The Orcasound column there, that is whether the website that we were seeing earlier, whether Orca site actually has the page that's up there for people to see. Some of those are hidden. The uptime column or the up percentage column is really over the past week, what percentage of the time has the stream actually been sending real valid audio? And I'm tuning the heuristic for that. So some of those numbers aren't exactly right, but they're pretty close. Yeah. And then looking forward to 2025, that rightmost column there is really just saying, does the Orca Hello, does the AI system actually know about this node? Okay. For 2025, we really want to say, how do we actually monitor the health of the AI that's monitoring that node, right? As opposed to just know of its existence. Is it actually working and up and doing detections and so on? And so that's really the biggest gap right now, is that rightmost column there is not terribly useful, but we want it to be. So all the components that's in the master architecture between Dataplicity and Mesmo and S3 and Orcasite and, well, Orca Hello is the most primitive in this analysis right here. And so we want notifications across all of these. So that ideally we want to see things like beach camp at Sunset Bay, which is like green across the board. That's exactly what we want nodes to look like. Okay. This is also showing things that are like beta nodes or things that are part of the overall Orcasound framework of stuff that don't even have hydrophones attached, like the Pat Price Ocean listening exhibit. Shows up on our dataplicity and management system, but doesn't actually have a hydrophone. So that's why you see some things that are hidden in yellow and beta nodes and dev nodes and so on. So that's the system, and happy to take requests for how to make this be more useful. But this is, again, primarily targeted to those who maintain the hardware as opposed to those who listen to the audio per se. So there you go.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brett Nestor, and I'm going to be going over the Orcasound machine learning model updates. So to give you a background on the machine learning model, the way that this model is built is that first the users and the current algorithms will listen to the live streams and they'll detect potential southern resident killer whale events. And so this is data that's curated from all of the uptime from all of the hydrophones. Next, the moderators will take these events and label whether or not these are true positives or false positives. And so this results in like 1 minute windows of true positive or false positive events. Then these events are further refined for training. So trimming up these 1 minute long clips into 2-second windows around the Southern resident calls. And then the model is retrained on these bouts, and then the updated model is deployed. And usually this happens on a yearly basis during our hackathons, and we'd like to make that a little bit quicker. So that's some of our goals for the next year is a systematic approach to improving the model as soon as the moderator examples are available. So we can kind of speed up this iteration, and then this will hopefully help us reach our second goal, which is consistent performance across the expanding network. And so some of the ongoing work to accomplish this during the last hackathon, we updated a lot of packages and code so that we could avoid the breaking changes and keep the model up to date. Next, we're determining which evaluation criteria to use for these automatic updates. And finally, we're trying to skip the step where you have to label them, or sorry, collapse them down into 2-second segments from the 60-second label resolution. And doing this should make a lot more data available. And so let's just take a look at these 2-second clips for now. So you can see that they're all in spectrogram format. This is what the model's ingesting. We'll have some masking on the time axis, and then we'll have some masking on the frequency axis. And this is just to do augmentation so that we can artificially increase our number of samples. And so that's great, but they require cropping specifically around those 2-second windows, which is very time intensive. So the current model is trained on 3,400 positive examples, 5,800 negative examples. But from the 1 minute moderated samples that we have available, we have an additional 685 minutes for the true positives, 4,900 minutes for the false positives. And if you split these into these 2-second windows using weak supervision, that means that you can have 8,000 additional samples, positive samples, and 50,000 additional negative samples. So a lot more data that we can work with if we use these weak supervision techniques to train the model. And so going forward, we'll be trying to go straight directly from these moderator clips to model training, and hopefully that should help us get underway with our goal of automatic retraining